Don't drink that Kunu, Ireti. She already knows your secret. What secret are you talking about? This note names your 187 million naira project. Only Morunkeji knew about that. How did you know about my private project? Ireti, you've misunderstood everything.
Temi placed a small note on the counter bearing the name of a 187,400,000 naira project, information Ireti had only ever shared with Morunkiji. When the seller's smile suddenly disappeared, Ireti realized she was not the only victim. Where are you watching from today? Comment your city before the truth begins. Ireti Balogun stepped through the towering glass entrance of Abeni Square, an upscale commercial complex located among the modern avenues of Lekki, Lagos. Sunlight reflected across the cream marble floor, sweeping over decorative palm trees, walnut-paneled walls, and fashion boutiques displaying Ankara dresses in cobalt blue, turmeric yellow, and deep wine red. Female executives in high heels hurried toward the elevators, some checking their phones as they walked, while receptionists in emerald green uniforms greeted familiar tenants with graceful nods. Ireti had worked in this building for nearly 3 years. Yet every morning it still felt like a stage where everyone was expected to appear as though their lives had never developed a single crack. She wore a midi dress printed with blue and burnt orange patterns, paired with a perfectly tailored ivory blazer. Her long braids were arranged neatly at the back of her head, and her small gold earrings moved gently with each step. A dark brown leather bag rested on her shoulder, carrying her tablet, architectural drawings, and a proposal she had revised so many times that she nearly knew every sentence by heart. Today, she needed to finalize the proposal for Azania Crown Suite. That contract could change the future of Ireti living concepts. The most powerful woman in Abeni Square has finally arrived. The warm voice came from the golden calabash Kunu counter before Ireti could reach the elevators. She turned and saw Morunkeji Afolayan standing behind a curved lightwood counter, decorated with patterns inspired by traditional Yoruba designs. Pale cream bottles of Kunu were arranged neatly over crushed ice, each tied with a small strip of colorful Ankara fabric around its neck, making them look like premium branded products rather than a traditional drink sold in the lobby of an office complex. Morunkeji wore a flowing turmeric yellow dress patterned with turquoise and rich purple. Her large gel was wrapped perfectly, her lips were painted a deep reddish brown, and her smile was wide enough to make an exhausted person believe they had just arrived carrying wonderful news. Ireti smiled. "You're flattering me again." "No, I am only saying what everyone else is too busy to say." Morunkeji reached into the refrigerated compartment and removed a bottle of Kunu. Less sugar, extra ginger, and not too much ice. Exactly the way a woman who is about to make all of Lagos remember her name likes it. Ireti accepted the bottle and shook her head gently. "You remember the preferences of too many people. I don't understand how you do it." Morunkeji leaned one hand against the counter and looked at her as though the answer were obvious. When a woman truly listens, she remembers. People do not forget words because they have poor memories. They forget because they were never genuinely interested. The statement touched the exact place inside Ireti that she did not want to admit was hurting. For several weeks, she had been working herself to exhaustion. Her employees saw the drawings, suppliers saw the budget, and clients saw the polished presentation, but nobody asked whether she was afraid. They assumed the founder of a company must always remain composed, always know the answer, and always walk into a boardroom carrying confidence that could not be shaken. Morunkeji was different. She always asked, "How is the hotel proposal progressing?" Morunkeji said as she wiped a drop of moisture from the bottle. "The last time we spoke, you said you wanted to combine Yoruba heritage with a modern luxury resort experience. I still think that is a brilliant idea." Ireti looked surprised. "You still remember that? You spoke about it with eyes bright as the lights at a wedding celebration. How could I forget?" I already glanced around. Only a few women were standing near the counter, each far enough away not to hear clearly. One wore a royal blue suit and was speaking on the phone. Another, dressed in a copper silk gown, was reading an email. Nobody appeared to be paying attention to their conversation. Ireti lowered her voice. I'm developing a main lobby inspired by Adaya patterns, but I don't want to use them as simple decorations. The shapes will be integrated into the ceiling structure, the partitions, and the lighting system. When guests enter, they should feel the culture within the space instead of seeing it displayed on a wall like an exhibition piece. Morunkeji nodded slowly, listening as though Iriti were explaining something of enormous importance. That is the difference between someone who decorates a room and someone who tells a story through space. Ireti fell silent for several seconds. That was exactly what she wanted the investment board to understand. But I'm still worried, she admitted. They might select a larger firm, one with more offices, more employees, and a longer international portfolio. Morun Kejis placed a hand against her chest. A large company may bring them an impressive list, but you are bringing them a vision they cannot purchase anywhere else. You speak as though you've read my proposal. There is no need. Morunkeji smiled. I only need to look at the way you hold that bag. Any woman protecting her documents that closely has placed her entire heart inside them. Ireti laughed, feeling the weight on her shoulders ease for the first time in several days. Across the lobby, Temi Ekun pushed the cleaning cart along a row of cream leather seats. She wore a mustard yellow uniform, a blue printed turban, and thin protective gloves. Timmy bent down to wipe a mark near one of the decorative plants, but her eyes briefly settled on the Kunu counter. Morunkeji did not notice, or she pretended not to. Have you finalized the budget? Morunkeji asked. Ireti lifted the Kunu bottle toward her lips, then paused. Almost. I'm still adjusting a few items. Do not reduce the value of your work simply because you are afraid they may say your price is too high. Ireti looked at her, startled by how accurately the advice landed. How did you know I was considering lowering the budget? Morunkeji shrugged. Because talented women often do that. They enter a room with abilities far beyond what is required, then reduce their own value so everyone else can feel comfortable. Ireti did not answer immediately. She knew Morunkeji was right. I need to get upstairs, she said, slipping the bottle into the outer pocket of her bag. I still have a great deal of work to finish. Morunkeji tilted her head and her smile softened. Go, my future queen. And remember, you do not need anyone's permission to deserve the seat you built with your own hands. Ireti turned away, warmed by those words. She walked toward the elevators, unaware that the smile on Morunkeji's face was slowly disappearing behind her. The Kunu seller watched until the steel doors closed. Then she reached beneath the counter, removed the thin tablet, and opened a carefully organized folder. The folder was labeled Ireti Balogun. Morunkeji entered a new note, Azenia Crown Suites, a dire design integrated into ceiling, partitions, and lighting. Client is considering reducing the budget. Across the lobby, Tempi remained still, the cleaning cloth held tightly in her hand. This time, she had seen everything. Ejiro Okafor stood motionless in the middle of her showroom in Lekki, staring at the large screen where a rival brand had just unveiled its latest collection. Models in coral red, turquoise, and golden brown gowns crossed the runway, wearing silhouettes, color combinations, and patterns almost identical to the sketches Ejiro had kept confidential for months. Around her, polished brass racks remained filled with garments that had yet to be released, while her employees exchanged silent glances, none of them daring to speak first. Ejiro placed the remote control on the table. Who sent the designs outside the studio? No one answered. She turned toward her assistant, Bose Ademi, who wore a plum-colored suit and held a tablet tightly against her chest. Bose, only you, the senior tailoring team, and I have seen this collection. Bose shook her head immediately. I never sent it to anyone. Every file is stored within our internal system. Then how did they know? Ejiro did not rise to her voice, but the disappointment within it made the entire room feel heavy. She had built Ejiro form from a small shop into a fashion house, invited to prestigious events across Lagos. This collection was supposed to become the most important turning point of her career. Now, it looked like a copy released too late. Elsewhere, inside Azure Palm residence a few streets away, Nansubuga Kato sat upright in a high-level conference room, both hands resting on a long glass table. She wore an emerald green silk dress, her natural twists arranged neatly in an elegant updo. Her expression remained composed enough that nobody could see the pressures tightening inside her chest. The hotel's general manager closed the folder in front of him. We have decided to offer the director of operations position to another candidate. Nansubuga looked at him. May I know the reason? Your proposal was excellent. However, the other candidate presented a very similar model and included a faster implementation plan. Nansubuga tilted her head slightly. What model? A tiered service system based on guest profiles, combined with specialized employee training for each experience category. She went silent. That was her idea. It was not a broad concept anyone could have produced by chance. It was a structure she had spent weeks developing, including 3 surface levels, a guest classification process, and an internal staff training system. She had not sent the complete plan to anyone outside the evaluation panel. When did the other candidate present the proposal? She asked. The general manager briefly avoided her eyes. A few days before you did. Nansubuga nodded, stood, and offered a smile polished enough that no one could accuse her of being unprofessional. Thank you for telling me. She walked out of the conference room with her posture perfectly straight. But when the door closed behind her, her hands tightened around the strap of her handbag. Inside the lifter, she studied her reflection in the polished steel wall and wondered whether she had overestimated her own abilities. Across the city, Folasad Akinremi sat inside the office of her events company, Heritage Bloom Experience. The room was decorated with brass lamps, amber velvet chairs, and large photographs from the luxurious weddings and corporate celebrations she had organized. In front of her lay a bank statement showing that an investment of 12,850,000 naira had been transferred into a corporate conference project that was now nearly inactive. Her financial associate, Kunle Ajayi, placed a folder on the desk. The partner company has moved most of the clients to Velora Strategy House. Fola said looked up. That is impossible. They signed a memorandum of understanding with us. The memorandum does not prevent them from working with another firm. But they used our client lists. Kunle sighed. It appears Velora knew the entire plan before we completed the agreement. Fola said leaned back in her chair. She remembered telling Morunkeji about the project while standing at the Kunu counter during a morning when she had been too excited to keep the news to herself. Moruntikeji had held her hand and told her that women who dared to dream on a large scale deserved to be seen by the entire city. Fohasad did not think about that conversation again. She only assumed she had moved too quickly. All 3 women reacted in nearly the same way. They questioned their employees, reviewed emails, changed passwords, and examined the people closest to them. None of them looked toward Golden Calabash Kunu because the drink counter did not resemble a place capable of harming anyone. It felt like a refuge. Ireti first learned about Ejiro's situation. The 2 women met in the corridor of Abeni Square as Ejiro left her studio, her face tense beneath flawless makeup. Have you seen Luma Thread's new collection? Ejiro asked. Ireti nodded. I noticed several elements that resemble your style, not several elements. Ejiro opened her tablet and placed 2 images side by side. One showed her original sketch, while the other displayed the collection that had just been unveiled. The similarities were so obvious that Ireti could not offer easy reassurance. Who do you suspect? Ireti asked. I don't know. Ejiro looked directly at her. That is what frightens me. I don't know who to look at within my own team without feeling as though I am insulting them. Ireti rested a hand gently on her arm. Do not reach a conclusion without evidence. Ejiro gave a sad smile. You sound like a lawyer. No, I simply do not want you to destroy a real relationship while the actual person responsible remains hidden. Later, Nansubuga called Ireti and told her about the lost promotion. Folasad also sent a message explaining that she had lost a major investment. 3 separate stories, 3 different forms of loss. 3 women who believed the cause must lie within themselves or their own teams. Ireti listened to each of them. She still did not see the thread connecting them. The following morning, she returned to Golden Calabash Kunu as usual. Morunkeji recognized the exhaustion on her face the moment she appeared. What happened to my queen? Ireti sighed. 3 women I know have just lost things that mattered deeply to them. One lost an idea, one lost an opportunity, and one lost money. Morunkeji poured Kunu into a small glass for her to taste. Strong women are often tested before they are recognized, or perhaps they trusted the wrong person. Morunkeji's hand paused very slightly, for no more than a moment. Then she smiled. Trusting the wrong person does not mean you were wrong to trust. Ireti took a sip of Kunu, unaware that behind the counter, the tablet screen displayed a list containing 4 names: Ejiro Okafor, Nansubuga Kato, Folasad Akinremi, and Ireti Balogun. Later, Ireti received an email from the Azania Crown Suites Investment Board. Another consulting firm had submitted a proposal containing ideas remarkably similar to hers, from the Adaya-inspired ceiling structure to the integration of partitions and lighting. The company's name appeared at the bottom of the message. Velora Strategy House. Ireti read it twice. Then she remembered Zemora Afolayan, Morunkiji's impeccably dressed daughter, and all the occasion when she had appeared beside the Kunu counter as though she was simply visiting her mother. For the first time, Ireti did not ask herself what she had done wrong. She asked who had been listening too closely. Ireti Balogun stood before the golden calabash Kunu counter inside the glass lobby of Abeni Square. One hand held her leather bag while the other rested on the cap of a bottle wrapped with a strip of cobalt blue Ankara fabric. Around her, female executives in vibrant dresses hurried across the marble floor, the sound of high heels mixing with opening elevator doors and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee drifting from the restaurant opposite the lobby. Morunkeji Afolayan stood behind the counter wearing her familiar smile. Her turmeric yellow gown embraced her full figure, and her royal purple gel rose above her head like a crown. Everything appeared so ordinary that the warning behind Ireti sounded almost absurd. Do not open that bottle of Kunu, Miss Ireti. Temidayo Ekun's voice was sharper and more decisive than Ireti had ever heard it. Ireti turned around. Temi stood beside her cleaning cart, her hands still covered in gloves and her expression tense beneath a blue turban. She did not move closer, but her eyes remained fixed on the Kunu bottle as though it were no longer an innocent drink. Marunkeji laughed first. Temi, you are frightening my customer. If you do not like my Kunu, simply say so. There is no need to turn the morning into a detective film. Several women nearby turned to look. One wearing a wine-red suit frowned. Another smiled faintly, as though expecting an entertaining argument before heading upstairs. Ireti did not laugh. What is wrong, Temi? Temi looked at Morunkeji, then back at Ireti's. This woman knew about the Azania Crown Suites project before you completed your proposal. The smile remained on Morunkeji's lips, but it no longer reached her eyes. Ireti tightened her grip on the bottle. Explain what you mean. Temi reached into the pocket of her uniform and removed a small piece of paper with one crumpled corner. She placed it on the wooden counter between the 2 women. Written on it were the words, Azania Crown Suites, a dire ceiling, integrated lighting partitions, adjustable budget. A chill traveled along Ireti's spine. She had spoken those details aloud, not during a meeting, not in front of her employees, not in an email. She had only discussed them while standing at this very counter. Where did you find this? Ireti asked. Beside the rubbish bin behind the counter. Morunkeji folded her arms. So now a discarded piece of paper has made me a criminal? No one has called you a criminal, Ireti said calmly. We are asking a question. No, she's excusing me in front of my customers. Morunkeji's voice remained gentle, but the sweetness covering it had become too perfect, like a mask being held firmly in place. Tipi drew a deep breath. I have seen you recording what your customers say. A murmur moved through the lobby. The woman in the wine-red suit turned fully toward the counter. A receptionist farther away also raised her head. Morunkeji shook her head with an expression of deep disappointment. You cleaned the floors here, Temi. You saw someone using a tablet and invented an entire story in your mind? Temi did not step back. I saw you opening folders named after individual customers. I saw you entering notes after they left. I also saw you transferring information onto a small storage drive. Morunkeji's smile disappeared for one brief moment. Ireti saw it. She remembered Morunkeji asking about the budget, the perfectly timed praise that had lowered her defenses, and the way the woman remembered everything about everyone. Before now, Ireti had called it kindness. She was no longer certain. A woman standing nearby spoke up. Temi, do you have any evidence besides this piece of paper? Temi turned toward her. Not enough to accuse anyone, but enough to request an investigation. That answer caught Ireti's attention. Temi did not speak like someone trying to create chaos. She sounded like a person who had thought carefully for a long time before deciding to speak. Morunkeji leaned both hands against the counter. How many years have you all known me? I remember your birthdays, your preferences, and the difficult days in your lives. Now, because the cleaner says a few words, everyone is prepared to look at me as though I am a fraud. She delivered the statement with visible pain, but the word cleaner fell too heavily. Temi's body stiffened slightly. Ireti placed the Kunu bottle on the counter. Her job does not make her words less valuable. The glass lobby fell silent. Morunkeji looked at Ireti, clearly unprepared for that response. That is not what I meant. It is exactly what you said. Ireti turned toward Temi. I will not reach a conclusion without evidence. But I will not ignore a warning simply because the person giving it does not wear a suit or have an office in this building. Temi nodded faintly. That is all I wanted. An older woman standing at the edge of the gathering whispered to her friend that the situation was outrageous. Her companion replied that Morunkeji had served them for years and had never done anything wrong. The whispers began dividing the crowd into two sides, even though no one truly knew what had happened. Ireti picked up the piece of paper. Temi, can you meet with me privately later? Yes. Morunkeji immediately interrupted. Ireti, are you truly going to believe this? Ireti looked directly at her. I believe it needs to be investigated after everything I have done for you. The question made Ireti pause. Morunkeji had never given her money, signed a contract for her, or helped complete her designs. What she had done was listen, encourage her, and make Ireti feel seen. But gratitude could not replace the truth. You sold me Kunu and offered me kind words, Ireti said. I appreciate that, but it does not mean I must ignore something suspicious. Morunkeji stared at her for a long moment. Then she turned to the customers watching and forced a laugh. Ladies, the Kunu is free today. Apparently, I must prove that my drinks do not contain the secrets of all Lagos. No one laughed. Ireti lifted her bag, placed the paper inside an inner compartment, and turned away. Temi pushed her cleaning car towards the opposite corridor, maintaining enough distance to avoid making the scene more tense. As Ireti approached the elevators, she looked back. Morunkeji was no longer watching the customers. She was watching Temi. It was not the wounded expression of someone who had been misunderstood, nor the uncontrolled anger of someone who had just been insulted. It was the cold, silent, calculating look of a person who had realized that someone else had touched the edge of her secret. Then Zimora Afolaya appeared from the side corridor, wearing a burnt orange suit with an expensive leather bag hanging from one arm. She walked directly toward the counter, looked at her mother, then glanced at Temi as she moved away. What happened? Zimora asked. Morunkeji did not answer immediately. She bent down, opened the cabinet beneath the counter, and checked the small compartment where the storage drive was usually kept. The compartment was empty. For the first time, Morunkeji completely lost her composure. Ireti Balogun sat inside the private conference room of Ireti Living Concepts. In front of her lay the note Emi had given her, and a copy of the proposal Velora Strategy House had submitted to Azania Crown Suites. Frosted glass walls surrounded the room, while beyond them stretched a modern design studio filled with carefully arranged samples of wood, stone, brass, and Edaya fabric. Ireti wore a sapphire blue suit, but her usual elegance could not conceal the tension in her eyes. Across from her, intellectual property lawyer Amaka Nosu placed a reddish-brown leather bag on the chair. removed her glasses, and studied the two sets of documents for a long time before speaking. Do you want me to say what will make you feel better, or what you need to hear? Ireti leaned back in her chair. What I need to hear. At this point, you do not have enough evidence to accuse Morunkeji or Zimora. Ireti remained silent for several seconds. Even though Velora's proposal closely resembles mine, similarity is not yet proof of theft. Amaka pointed at the note. A piece of paper containing the project's name does not prove who transferred the information. Temi's account deserves serious consideration, but if we act solely on her statement, Morunkeji can claim she misunderstood what she saw. So what am I supposed to do? Sit here and watch them use my idea? No, Ambaka pulled the file closer. We stop reacting emotionally and begin constructing a chain of events. Ireti looked at her. A chain of events? When did you share the information? Who was present? How long afterward did it appear elsewhere? What was taken? Who benefited? Amaka's voice remained calm. It was not cold, but it refused to allow anger to control the room. That was why Ireti had called her. Amaka was not the kind of person who used a rumor to manufacture a guilty party. She trusted evidence, process, and the power of truth when it was arranged correctly. Ireti opened her tablet. I'll call Ejiro first. Ejiro Okafor arrived wearing a coral red gown with gold embroidery around the neckline and sleeves. She entered the room with a firm expression, but the moment Ireti placed the two fashion images side by side on the screen, the pain became visible on her face. Amaka asked, who had access to this color palette? My design team, the main tailoring workshop, and a fabric supplier. Anyone outside the company? No one. Ireti did not interrupt. She allowed Ejiro to remember on her own. A long silence followed. Then Ejiro looked up. There was one occasion when I discussed it at the Kunu counter. Amaka asked, how specific were you? Ejiro touched the gold bracelet around her wrist. I said I wanted to combine terracotta with turquoise and use geometric patterns running along the body of each dress. I also talked about releasing the collection in separate color groups. How did Morunkeji respond? She said I was creating a collection the women of Lagos would remember for years. Ireti glanced at Amaka. The lawyer displayed no reaction beyond writing a note. Nansubuga Kato arrived next. She wore a deep purple pencil dress paired with a modern Ugandan print shawl. She retained the calm presence of an experienced hotel manager, although exhaustion had settled behind her eyes. Amaka asked, where had you previously presented your tiered service proposal? In a private document and one internal discussion. Did you ever discuss it at Golden Calabash? Nansubuga lowered her gaze. Yes. What details did you share? I talked about the 3 service levels, the guest classification system, and the way employees would be trained according to different customer needs. Ireti drew a slow breath. Those were precisely the ideas that had appeared in the successful candidate's presentation. Nansubuga looked at the two women. Morunkeji even asked whether the highest service level would require a separate manager. Amaka stopped writing. She asked the question that specific. Yes. And did you answer? I did. There was no anger toward anyone else in Nansubuga's voice. It carried more disappointment in herself than anything else. I should have been more careful. Ireti immediately responded. No, you may wish you had shared less, but the person who used your information is still responsible for that choice. Nansubuga looked up. Her expression softened slightly. Folasad Akinremi was the last woman to enter. She wore a golden kaftan with a beaded neckline, but the brightness of her clothing could not conceal the pressure of the money she had lost. When Amaka asked about the conference project, Fosesad took longer than the others to respond. I did not only mention the name of the project, she admitted. I discussed the expected investment amount, the potential client list, and when the partner company needed funding. Was Zimora near the counter that day? Ireti asked. Folosaid closed her eyes briefly. Yes, she arrived to collect a drink for her mother, or at least that was what I believed. The room fell silent. Amaka looked at the 4 women. Now we have a pattern. Ejiro folded her arms. What pattern? All of you shared valuable information in the same place. Afterward, that information was used by someone connected to Morunkeji. but we still need to prove how the information traveled. Ireti opened Velora's proposal on the large screen. There is one detail I cannot dismiss as coincidence. She scrolled to the description of the hotel lobby. In one early draft, Ireti had mistyped the phrase light guiding partitions. She had corrected the error in the final version, but the original mistake remained in a draft she had opened on her tablet while standing at the Kunu counter. The same unusual error appeared in Velora's proposal. Amaka moved closer to the screen. That is a very distinctive mistake, and Zimora could not have independently made the exact same one, Ireti said. Amaka nodded. This is not yet enough for a public accusation, but it is strong enough to request an examination of the document source. Ejiro placed both hands on the table. Then we confront them immediately. No, Amaka replied. Why? Because if they are holding data, an early confrontation will give them time to delete it. Fola said looked at Amaka. What do you think we should do? We submit a formal report to Albany Square Management. We ask them to preserve the data on the counter's registered devices according to proper procedure. Meanwhile, we collect version histories, emails, sketches, invoices, and every document that proves ownership. Ireti looked at each woman in the room. They had arrived carrying different losses, but now their stories stood beside one another, like separate pieces of fabric finally forming a complete pattern. None of them was weak. They had simply been isolated long enough to believe their failures belonged to them alone. Ireti's phone vibrated. A new email from Azania Crown Suites appeared, requesting that she explain why her proposal contained so many similarities to a document Velora had submitted earlier. She finished reading and placed the phone down. Ejiro asked, "Are you all right?" "No," Ireti answered Edith honestly, "but I will not allow them to turn my own idea into evidence against me." Amaka closed the folder. Then, from this moment forward, no one acts alone. The four women nodded. Across Albany Square, Morunkeji stood behind the Kunu counter, staring at the list of customer names on a tablet. Zimora stood beside her with folded arms and tightly pressed lips. "You need to delete everything," Zimora said. "We cannot delete it immediately. Management may examine the device history. Then, how much have you left behind for them to find?" Morunkeji did not answer. For the first time, she realized that the women she had observed separately had begun speaking into one another. A secret remained powerful only while its victims continued standing alone. Ireti Balogun stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of her modern apartment in Lekki, watching ribbons of light stretch across the Lagos lagoon. Inside, the living room was furnished with cream-upholstered seating, a walnut coffee table, slender brass lamps, and abstract artworks inspired by Yoruba patterns. Yet none of that elegance made the apartment feel less silent. Her sapphire blue blazer rested across the back of a chair. Her high heels stood neatly beside the rug, and the Azania Crown Suite proposal remained untouched on the table, a reminder that someone was using her own ideas to threaten the company she had built. Ireti poured herself a glass of water and stood for a long time without drinking it. She had once believed the silence in this apartment was evidence of success. It meant she could afford to live in a home or overlooking the city, remain independent without waiting for anyone to return, and make every important decision on her own. Tonight, the silence felt like another room hidden inside the room around her. It was larger. Her phone vibrated on the table. Amaka's name appeared on the screen. Ireti hesitated before answering. "Have you reviewed the version history again?" Amaka asked. "Yes. Do you have enough archived material to prove that your proposal was developed before Velora's?" "Yes, but I still feel as though I am running behind my own idea." Amaka was quiet for a moment. "That is exactly what they want you to believe. When someone takes what belongs to you, they do not only take the asset, they also make you question whether you ever deserved to own it." Ireti looked at the proposal on the table. "Perhaps I was too careless. You shared information with someone you trusted. Isn't that carelessness?" "Not always." Ireti gave a bitter laugh. "Amaka, I told a Kunu seller almost the entire strategy behind a 187,400,000 naira contract. Why did you tell her?" The question left Ireti silent. She could have said Morun Keji knew how to ask the right questions. She could have explained that the woman remembered every detail or offered encouragement at the perfect moment and made every customer feel important. But that was not the whole truth. I told her because she asked whether I was afraid, Ireti finally said. Amaka did not interrupt. No one at the office asked me that, Ireti continued. My employees needed me to be confident. The clients needed me to sound certain. Suppliers needed me to be decisive. Everyone looked at me as though the entire company would lose direction if I admitted I was worried. And Morun Keji made you feel that you were allowed to be vulnerable. For a few minutes, that was what you needed at the time. Ireti closed her eyes. She remembered the evenings she had spent alone with her drawings, eating cold meals beside her computer, and revising figures without anyone to tell that she was exhausted. She remembered employees leaving the office after wishing her a pleasant evening while she remained behind, because she did not anyone to see that the company's founder could also be frightened by a major decision. Moronkeji had seen that, or she had simply known how to exploit it. I feel foolish, Ireti said. Do not use someone else's betrayal as a weapon against the version of yourself that needed to be heard. Amaka's voice was calm but firm. Ireti opened her eyes. Do you always speak as though you are standing in a courtroom? Only when my friend is trying to convict herself without evidence. A small smile crossed Ireti's face. After the call ended, she sat on the sofa and opened the new group chat between herself, Ejiro, Nansubuga, and Folasad. No one had written much. Ejiro had uploaded photographs of her dated sketches. Nansubuga had shared her internal training documents. Folasad had provided contracts, transfer record, and a list of clients later approached by Volora. Each file looked like a fragment of the truth. But Ireti noticed something else. All three women were trying to prove that they had not failed. She started a group call. Ejiro answered first. Is there any new information? She asked. Not yet. I only wanted us to talk. Nansubuga joined shortly afterward, followed by Fol Lasad, who appeared on the screen wearing a Taka's kaftan and looking exhausted. Ireti studied their faces. Are any of you blaming yourselves? No one answered immediately. Eventually, Folasad sighed. I shared too much, Ejiro said. I examined the phones of the two employees I trusted most. I hate that I looked at them as though they were traitors. Nansubuga lowered her gaze. I thought I lost the promotion because I was not good enough. Ireti placed the phone on a stand. That is why we need to speak with one another. They did not succeed only because they obtained information. They succeeded because they made each of us believe the loss was our private failure. Folasade asked, what do you want us to do now? We stop hiding because we feel ashamed. No one investigates alone. No one confronts them alone. And no one takes the story online before we have clear evidence. Ejiro frowned. Why should we protect them? We are not protecting them. We are protecting ourselves. Ireti explained that a public accusation made too early could lead to deleted evidence, pressure on witnesses, and the entire matter being reframed as an emotional dispute between women. Zimora could present herself as the target of jealousy. Morunkeji could use her friendly reputation to make the community doubt them. Nansubuga nodded. The truth needs structure. Exactly, Ireti said, and we are going to build it. The call ended with a different feeling from the one with which it had begun. None of the women had recovered what she had lost, but the shame felt lighter because no one was carrying it alone. Ireti stood, walked into the open kitchen, and noticed a bottle of Kunu still inside the refrigerator. She had bought it before Temi's warning. The Ankara strip around its neck remained beautiful, its blue and yellow colors vivid under the refrigerator light. She picked it up. For a few seconds, Ireti wanted to pour the entire bottle down the sink. She wanted to turn the drink into a symbol of deception, something that would remind her never to trust anyone again. Then she placed it back. The Kunu had not pirated her. A person had. If Ireti turned every act of kindness into danger, every conversation into a trap, and every friendly woman into someone suspicious, Morunkeji would take more than an idea from her. She would also take Ireti's ability to remain connected to other people. Her phone vibrated again. A message from Temi appeared. Miss Ireti, I think you need to see this. Below the message was an image captured inside the Abeni Square parking area. Moronkeji stood beside a black SUV, still wearing her familiar turmeric yellow dress. Across from her was Zimora, in a burnt orange suit, one hand opening a leather bag, while the other accepted a small storage drive. The image was not perfect, but it was clear enough. Ireti enlarged it and immediately called Temi. When did you take this? I didn't take it. The operations camera recorded it. I asked the shift manager to preserve the footage because the exchange looked unusual. Have you told anyone else? No, do not send it to anyone. Amaka will explain how to submit it through the proper process. Temi remained silent for a moment. Do you believe me now? Ireti looked at the image on the screen. I believe you saw what everyone else was too busy to notice. Isn't that the same thing? Not entirely. But you deserve to be heard from the beginning. At the other end of the call, Temi released a quiet breath. Afterward, Ireti opened the curtains wider. Lagos continued shining below her, vast and restless, filled with rooms where people were keeping secrets, losing opportunities, or trying to rebuild trust. The apartment no longer felt quite as empty. On the table in front of her was the first clear evidence that information had truly traveled from Moronkeji to Zimora. This time, Ireti did not feel ashamed that she had once trusted someone. She only felt the responsibility to stop that trust from being sold to anyone else. The glass doors of Albany Square closed behind the final customer, leaving the vast lobby beneath the soft glow of golden lights reflected across the marble floor. The fashion boutiques had lowered their shutters. The restaurant opposite the lobby had only a few employees clearing tables, and the golden calabash Kunu counter stood silently in the middle of the luxurious space like a small island decorated with light wood, polished brass, and strips of vibrant Ankara fabric. Ireti Balogun stood several steps away from the counter in a wine-red dress, with a thin cream-colored coat draped over it. Beside her were Amaka Nwosu, Abeni Square's operations manager, two information technology employees, and Temidayo Ekun. Morunkeji Afolayan was also present. She was not wearing her familiar turmeric yellow gown. Instead, she had chosen a deep turquoise kaftan embroidered with gold thread around the neckline, while her gel was wrapped lower than usual. She stood upright, with her hands folded across her stomach, attempting to maintain the calm appearance of someone who believed every misunderstanding would eventually disappear on its own. Zimora stood beside her mother in a royal purple suit, her leather handbag resting on a chair behind her. She did not look at Ireti. Her eyes moved only between the operations manager and the tablet lying on the counter. Ebony Square's operations director, Abosid Fashola, opened the file in her hands. To prevent any misunderstanding, I will repeat this clearly, she said. This is an internal examination of a device registered for commercial use inside the building. No one here is permitted to open, copy, or delete data without authorization. Morunkeji's lips curved slightly. Finally, someone is speaking through proper procedure instead of gossip. Amaka looked at her. Procedure protects both the accused and the people making the complaint. I do not need protection from stories imagined by a cleaner. Temi tightened her hands slightly. Ireti turned toward Morunkeji. You may challenge the evidence, but do not continue using Temi's work to diminish her. Morunkeji held Ireti's gaze for a moment, then looked away. An IT employee named Seyi Edebola put on protective gloves, checked the tablet's serial number, and matched it against the list of registered devices in the counter's list records. He connected the tablet to a specialized laptop and began creating a forensic copy of the data in accordance with the evidence preservation process. Zimora spoke. This is a sales device. It only contains drink orders and information about regular customers. Seyi did not look up. We will examine only the approved scope. And if you find nothing unusual, Abosid replied, the official report will state that clearly. Morunkeji exhaled as though the answer had restored her advantage. Ireti remained still, but she could feel her heart beating heavily. She did not want to see anything that would make the betrayal undeniable. Part of her still hoped the paper Temi had found was merely an accidental note, The image from the parking area showed an innocent exchange of documents, and the typo inside Velora's proposal was only an unbelievable coincidence. That hope was fragile. Sei opened the first directory. A list of names appeared on the screen. Ejiro Okafor, Nansubuga Koto, Folasad Akinremi, Ireti Balogun, dozens of other names appeared beneath them. No one spoke. Sei opened Ejiro's folder. Inside were short notes separated into categories: color palette, release plan, supplier, estimated budget, and concerns within her team. Ejiro was not present, but Ireti could imagine her expression if she saw those lines. Amaka stepped closer. Where were these notes created? Sei examined the system data. Most were entered directly on this device. Several audio files were created through the recording application. Morunkeji immediately replied, "I recorded them so I could remember my customers' drink preferences." Sei opened one of the files. Ejiro's voice played through the speaker, clear but quiet. She was describing how she planned to combine terracotta with turquoise in an unreleased collection. Morunkeji's voice followed, gentle and encouraging, persuading her to share more about the launch strategy. Ireti felt her throat tightened. Temi lowered her eyes toward the floor. Morunkeji did not move. Amaka asked, "Did you receive A0's permissions to record that conversation?" Customers were speaking in a public place. That is not an answer. Zimora stepped forward. "My mother does not understand data privacy law. She simply recorded details she was afraid she would forget." Amaka turned towards her. "Then why were the files transferred to an account owned by Velora Strategy House?" Zimora froze. Sei opened the data transfer history. A long series of folders had been copied to a storage account registered under Zimora's company. Each transfer included a classification note: fashion potential, hotel opportunity, client with capital. Easy to persuade. Forsad appeared beneath the final label. A cold wave of anger moved through Ireti. It was not only because of the money or the contract. It was because human beings had been reduced to small labels that could be exploited. She looked at Morunkeji. "You recorded our weaknesses?" Morunkeji replied slowly, "I only described your circumstances. You wrote that Folasad makes decisions more easily when someone praises her vision. You wrote that Nan Subuga fears being treated as an outsider. You wrote that Ejiro has conflict within her design team." Morunkeji pressed her lips together. Ireti stepped closer. "You wrote that I share more when someone asks about my pressure." The air inside the lobby seemed to grow heavier. Zimora interrupted. "Customer information is a business asset. Every company studies behavior." Amaka looked at her with cold precision. "Market research does not mean secretly recording private conversations and then using them to gain an advantage in a competitive bid. No one forced them to speak." Ireti turned towards Zimora. "No one forced us to speak. But your mother created a sense of safety so we would lower our guard, and you transformed what we shared into strategy." Zimora folded her arms. "You are turning your own carelessness into someone else's crime." For a moment, Ireti fell silent. In the past, that statement might have made her lower her head. "Not anymore. I accept responsibility for sharing too much," she said. "But my responsibility does not erase yours for using the information." Sei opened the folder labeled Ireti Balogun. Inside were audio recordings, screenshot documents, budget notes, and a list of questions Morunkeji was supposed to ask during Ireti's future visits to the counter. The final line appeared clearly: "Encourage her to reveal more about the final budget before the proposal is locked." Temi raised one hand to cover her mouth. Abozi turned toward Morunkeji. "Would you like to explain this?" Morunkeji looked at the screen, then at her daughter. "At first, I only wanted to help Zimora understand the market," she said slowly. "She started a company in an industry where people only open doors for those who already have connections. I believed a few useful suggestions would give her a chance." Zimora turned sharply toward her mother. "You do not need to say anything else." But Morunkeji continued. Then she wanted more: custom names, budgets, fees, and plans. "I knew I should have stopped. But you did not," Ireti said. Morunkeji looked directly at her. "No, one short word was enough to destroy every excuse." Abosid ordered the tablet and storage drive to be sealed. She announced that Golden Calabar Kunu would be suspended while the investigation continued and that the preserved data would be transferred to the legal department through the proper process. Zimora picked up her bag. "This is not over." Amaka replied, "You are right, because it has only now been to be documented accurately." Morunkeji remained behind after her daughter left. She looked at the bottles of Kunu still arranged neatly inside the refrigerator. Every bottle remained beautiful, wrapped in colorful fabric and completely harmless. Ireti looked at them too. What had caused these women to lose their opportunities had never been inside the drink. It had been hidden within sweet questions, secret recordings, and a system built upon other people's trust. Temi stepped closer to Ireti. "Are you disappointed that I was right?" Ireti looked at her. "I am disappointed that all of us made you speak for so long before anyone was willing to listen." Temi nodded, and her expression softened. On the computer screen, Ireti's folder remained open. The cold notes lay there as proof that someone had studied her carefully. But they had overlooked one thing. Ireti was no longer standing alone. The glass-walled conference room on Abeni Square's executive floor was so quiet that even the soft hum of the air conditioning seemed unusually clear. Ireti Balogun sat at one end of the long ebony table. Beside her were Amaka Nwosu, Temidayo Ekun, Ejiro Okafor, Nansubuga Kato, and Folasad Akinremi. Across from them sat Morunkeji Afakolayan in a dark blue kaftan embroidered with gold thread. Zimora wore an ivory white suit with sharp tailoring, her bobbed hair styled perfectly, as though a flawless appearance might help her maintain control of the room. There was no crowd. There were no cameras. No one had been invited to witness another person's downfall as entertainment. There were only the women who had lost something and the two people who needed to explain how those losses had occurred. Abosid Fashola, Abeni Square's operations manager, placed a thin file in front of each person. "This meeting is intended to record the explanations of all parties before the documents are transferred to the legal department and the appropriate authorities," she said. "Everyone will have the opportunity to speak. No one may interrupt or insult another person." Zimora leaned back in her chair. "I hope that rule also applies to those who have described my company's market research as theft." Amaka opened her file. "No one here is relying on labels. We are relying on data." "What data?" Amaka slid a copy of the transfer logs toward her. Audio files from the Golden Calabash Kunu device were transferred to a storage account belonging to Valora Strategy House. The information in those files later appeared in business proposals, client approach documents, and competitive strategies created by your company. Zimora glanced down at the pages and gave a faint laugh. "Information spoken in a public place is not private property." Ejiro responded immediately. "My unreleased designs are private property." Nansubuga added, "So is my internal operations strategy." Fola Said placed both hands on the table. "And my client list and investment figures were never yours to use." Zimora looked from one woman to the next. "You spoke willingly. No one forced you." Ireti studied her for a long moment before replying. "No one forced us to speak, but your mother created a space where we believe we were being listened to, not categorized." Morunkeji lowered her eyes. Ireti continued. "She remembered our preferences, asked the questions that made us open up, and recorded our fears, plans, and weaknesses. Then you transformed those things into business advantages." Zimhora raised an eyebrow. "That is observation. In business, the person who understands the customer better wins." Amaka opened another document. "Understanding the customer does not mean secretly recording private conversations and using the information to compete for their contracts." She placed two proposals on the table. One belonged to Ireti Living Concepts. The other belonged to Velora Strategy House. Ireti's early draft contained a distinctive typing error. The same error appears unchanged in your company's proposal. How do you explain that? Zimora did not look at the documents immediately. A brief silence filled the room. Then she said, "Perhaps the same consultant reviewed both proposals." Ireti shook her head. "We did not share any consultants. Then one of your employees may have sent it." Amaka turned another page. The version history shows that the copied paragraph appeared in Velora's file after the recording and screenshots from Morunkeji's device were transferred. Zimora's fingers tightened slightly. For the first time, a crack appeared in her confidence. Morunkeji spoke. Zimora, that is enough. Zimora turned toward her mother. Do not say anything. You told me you only wanted general information. You agreed to help because I thought I was helping you find customers. Zimora laughed coldly. And now you want to pretend you did not know. The room became silent. Morunkeji lifted her head. The charm that had once made the entire Albany Square lobby adore her was gone from her expression. At first, I only recorded names, occupations, and the things customers liked, she said. Then you asked who was preparing a project, who had access to capital, who was unhappy with her company, and who was afraid of losing her position. She paused, one hand resting against the fabric of her gown. I knew it was no longer help. Folasade looked at her. Then why did you continue? Morunkeji did not answer immediately. Because Zimora's company began to grow, she finally said. People invited her into places where they had never noticed her before. I had sold Kunu for years and had always been called the woman behind the counter. When my daughter entered prestigious boardrooms, I felt as though my life had finally proved something. Ejiro's voice became calmer. You tried to prove your value by taking value from us. Morunkeji closed her eyes. I told myself that all of you still had talent, that even if you lost one opportunity, you would create another. Nansubuga answered, the person who causes the damage always finds it easy to say the victim can begin again. Morunkeji could no longer look at her. Temi had remained quiet since the meeting began. She finally spoke. I reported seeing you transfer files after the building had closed. Morunkeji looked at her. And I made everyone believe you were causing trouble. You did more than that, Temi said. You used my job to make my words seem smaller. Morunkeji lowered her head. I am sorry. Temi looked directly at her. I hear your apology, but I do not know whether I believe it. No one asked Temi to forgive her. Ireti understood how important that was. An apology did not automatically create an obligation for the injured person to repair the relationship. Zimora stood. This meeting has turned into an emotional trial. Absusid's voice became firm. Sit down. No. My company submitted a valid proposal. Azania Crown Suite will judge the work, not complaints about feelings. Ireti also rose, but her voice remained composed. Have you already submitted your final proposal? Zimora looked at her. Yes. And you believe that submitting first makes everything yours. In business, the person who arrives first often wins. Ireti replied, only when what they bring truly belongs to them. Zimora lifted her handbag. You can try to prove whatever you want, but the board will not delay its decision because you feel betrayed. Omaka looked at Ireti before speaking. We do not need them to delay because of emotion. We need them to examine the evidence ownership. Zimora walked toward the door. Before leaving, she turned toward her mother. You ruined everything. Morunkeji lifted her head, her voice barely above a whisper's. No, Zimora. I helped you build something that never truly belonged to you. The door closed behind her. No one in the room felt victorious. Ejiho had not yet recovered her collection. Nansubuga still did not have the position she had lost. Folasade had not recovered the 12,850,000 naira diverted from her project. Ireti still had to face the Azania Crown Suites board. The truth had been spoken, but justice was not complete. Ebozid collected the copies of the documents. The legal department will continue the process. Gold in Calabash Kunu will remain suspended. Velora Strategy House will receive formal notice to preserve all related data. Morunkeji looked at Ireti. Do you hate me? Ireti studied the woman who had once made her feel deeply understood. No, she said, but I no longer trust you. The answer wounded Morunkeji more deeply than an insult would have. Ireti continued. Forgiveness, if it ever comes, does not mean you will be allowed to return to your fourth place in our lives. Morunkeji nodded slowly. Ireti lifted her file. She knew the most difficult confrontation still lay ahead. She would have to walk into the Azania Crown Suites boardroom and prove that a stolen idea did not mean she lacked originality. It meant someone else had taken from her. As everyone prepared to leave, a notification appeared on Ireti's phone. The investment board had accepted Velora's final proposal for evaluation, and Ireti's presentation would be her only opportunity to explain the origin of the disputed design. Amaka read the message and looked at her. Are you ready? Ireti closed her bag. I do not need their sympathy. Then what do you need? Ireti looked down at her drawings. I need the truth to stand beside the name of the woman who created it. Ireti Balogun walked through the dark wooden doors of the Azania Crown Suites boardroom, carrying a sapphire blue file and the tablet containing the complete development history of her design. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Lagos skyline stretched beneath the sunlight. Modern buildings reflected across the lagoon, and streams of vehicles moved along Lekki's elegant avenues. Inside, a travertine conference table stood among chestnut leather chairs. Contemporary Nigerian artwork decorated the walls, and white floral arrangements gave the room a refined atmosphere without making it feel excessive. Ireti wore a turquoise suit with a thin gold border along the collar, caramel brown heels, and teardrop earrings. Her appearance was flawless, but the hand holding her file felt colder than usual. She was afraid, but she no longer needed to hide it. Amaka Nwosu sat in the row behind her alongside Ejiro Okafor, Nansubuga Kato, Folasade Kinremi, and Temidayo Ekun. They had not come to speak on Ireti's behalf or create a loud confrontation. They simply wanted the woman stepping forward to know that she no longer had to prove what she had endured alone. Zimora Afolayan was already seated on the opposite side of the room. She wore an ivory white suit, her bobbed hair polished and smooth, with a simple gold necklace around her neck. Her tablet rested before her beside a file, bearing the Velora Strategy House emblem embossed in bronze. Zimora sat upright with her chin slightly raised, but her fingers continuously turned the ring on her right hand. The board chairwoman, Olubunmi Adebayo, closed the conference room door and looked at both women. Before we begin, I want to make it clear that the board will not decide based on sympathy, personal relationships, or who submit first. Ireti nodded. That is exactly what I want. Zimora leaned slightly into her chair. So does my company. One board member opened the documents before him. Ms. Balogun, Velora Strategy House has argued that the similarities between the two proposals are the result of common design trends currently being used in luxury hospitality. Ireti placed her file on the table. Members of the board, Adaya patterns, local materials, and contemporary architecture do not belong exclusively to any designer. I am not here to claim ownership of Yoruba culture. The answer caused several members to look up. Ireti continued, however, the specific process, structural system, guest flow strategy, lighting model, and the way I integrated those elements into this project are part of the work I developed. I would like to prove that through documentation, not emotion. Olubunmi signaled for her to begin. Ireti connected her tablet to the large screen. The first image was a rough pencil sketch containing erased lines and handwritten notes. This was my first concept for the main lobby, she said. I began with one question. How can a modern hotel express the spirit of Lagos without reducing its culture to decoration? She moved to the next image, a diagram showing how guests would circulate through the space. The partitions are not only visually attractive, they direct guests from the reception area toward the lounge, creating privacy without making the lobby feel divided. A board member asked, what about the lighting system? The light passes through geometric openings inspired by Adaya. It reflects natural light across the space and creates depth without requiring an excessive number of decorative fixtures. Zimora interrupted. That is a common method in modern hotel design. Ireti turned toward her. You are right. But can you explain why the spacing between the light openings, the number of modules, and the dimensions of the partitions in Velora's proposal exactly match my prototype? Zimora did not immediately answer. Ireti displayed two documents side by side. This is a draft from Ireti Living Concepts. This is Velora proposal. The two Egyptians on the screen were almost identical. Ireti enlarged one phrase. In an early version, I mistyped light guiding as light gilding. I corrected the mistake in my final proposal, but the same error appears in Velora's submission. The sound of pages turning moved around the table. Zimora folded her arms. One spelling mistake is not enough to prove copying. You are right, Ireti replied. That is why I brought more than a spelling mistake. She presented the version history, correspondence with architect, invoices for the model, material samples, photographs from internal design reviews, and notes from suppliers. Every document demonstrated that the idea had developed through multiple stages instead of suddenly appearing inside a presentation created in response to a dispute. Amaka stood after receiving permission from the board chairwoman. In addition to the creative records, we submitted logs showing data transferred from the golden calabash Kunu device to an account belonging to Velora Strategy House. The data was preserved by Abeni Square's technology department. Zimora turned toward Olubunmi. That material still belongs to an investigation that has not been concluded. Amaka maintained her calm tone. That is correct. Therefore, we are not asking this board to determine legal responsibility. We are asking whether Velora can demonstrate that its proposal was developed independently. A board member looked at Zimora. Do you have an equivalent creative development record? Zimora opened her tablet. We have internal presentations and market research notes, original drawings. My team developed the concept directly through design software. Version history. Zimora scrolled through the screen longer than necessary. We are still collecting it. Correspondence with an architect. This is a strategic proposal, not a construction document. Iti did not smile. She did not want to win by enjoying another person's discomfort. She only wanted the room to understand the difference between someone who created an idea and someone who merely repeated its visible surface. Olubunmi turned toward Ireti. Miss Balogun, beyond the origin of the design, the board is concerned about feasibility. Can you explain the maintenance costs? Ireti changed the display to a technical diagram. The structures are divided into independent modules. If one section is damaged, the hotel can replace only that section instead of removing the entire partition. The materials have been treated for humidity and will be supplied by 3 approved local workshops. What about labor? Ireti Living Concepts will work with local artisans during the finishing process, while the main structural work will be handled by qualified technical teams. I do not use cultural storytelling as a substitute for operational standards. Another member asked, what makes this design appropriate for Azenia Crown Suites rather than any other hotel? Ireti looked at the image of the main lobby on the screen. Azania does not need a space that only looks beautiful in photographs. You need a lobby where international guests immediately understand that they are in Lagos while still receiving the privacy, efficiency, and luxury associated with your brand. The room became silent. It was not the silence of doubt. It was silence if people who were fans listening. After the presentation, the board asked both parties to wait outside. Ireti walked into the hallway and rested lightly against the glass railing. Her shoulders finally dropped after being held too straight for too long. Temi approached her. You did not say much about what they did to you. I do not want the board to choose me out of sympathy. But what happened is still part of the truth. Ireti nodded. Yes, but my work is also part of the truth. Ejiro smiled. They did not only see that someone copied you, they saw why someone wanted to copy you. Ireti laughed softly. Amaka stood beside the boardroom door with her arms folded. You did something very important in there. What? You did not try to prove that Zimora was a terrible person. You proved that the worker belonged to you. The door opened. Everyone returned to the conference table. Zimora sat down first, her expression more rigid than before. Ireti rested both hands on the table without looking toward her. Olubonmi read the board's decision. The board finds that Ireti Living Concepts has provided sufficient evidence of the design development process, ownership of the disputed content, and the ability to execute the project. Velora Strategy House has not demonstrated that the disputed portions of its proposal were independently developed. Zimora immediately objected. My company rejects that conclusion. You may follow the appropriate appeal process, Olubunmi replied. However, Velora's proposal will be removed from the current evaluation. She turned towards Ireti. Ireti Living Concepts is invited to proceed to the final negotiation stage. This decision is based on design quality, documented origin, and implementation capability. Ireti took a slow breath. Thank you for placing the correct name beside the work that created it. Zimora stood and closed her tablet with more force than necessary. As she passed Ireti, she stopped. You think you have won? Ireti looked at her. I did not come here to defeat you. Then why did you come? To stop asking other people for permission to recognize is what belongs to me. Zimora stared at her for several seconds before leaving the room. No one applauded. There were no cheers. There was only a slowly spreading sense of relief, like a heavy door finally opening. Outside the boardroom, a receptionist handed Ireti a cream-colored envelope. Her name was written across it in Morunkeji's familiar rounded handwriting. Amaka looked at the envelope. Are you going to open it? Yes, but not here. Why? Ireti looked through the glass toward the city still moving below. Because this is the day I reclaimed my voice. I do not want that moment to end with an explanation from the person who tried to take it. She walked toward the elevator with the women who had stood beside her. Ejiro still had a collection to protect. Nansu Burger was still waiting for a fair review. Folasad still had to recover the money she had lost. Temi was only beginning a small but well-earned professional opportunity. Justice had not restored everything, but the truth had begun returning each thing to its proper place. For the first time since seeing the copied proposal, Ireti no longer felt that she needed to reclaim her idea. She only needed to keep living as the woman who had created it. This story reminds us that trust is not foolishness, but it must have boundaries. Ireti was not wrong for needing someone to listen. The wrongdoing belonged to the person who turned honest sharing into a tool for exploitation. In business, ideas, data, budgets, and plans are valuable assets, so they should be protected and shared only with the right people. However, the deeper lesson is not to become suspicious of everyone. If betrayal causes us to close our hearts completely, the person who hurt us continues controlling how we love and connect with others. True strength means preserving kindness without granting unlimited access to our lives. The story also honors people like Temi, who are often overlooked. The value of a warning does not depend on someone's job title or social position. When women stop blaming themselves, share evidence, and stand together, the truth has a better chance of being recognized fairly. Justice may not restore everything exactly as it was, but it can restore a person's name, dignity, and control over her own life. That is the kind of victory that lasts. Do you think Ireti should forgive Morunkeji? Share your opinion and city, like this video, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories about courage and dignity.